All right. I'll just give everyone a moment to take their seats and we'll get started. All right, good evening everyone and welcome to the December meeting of the Ottawa Centre of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. We've got a great program for you tonight, and we also have a special event tonight, which is our annual general meeting. Our annual general meeting is where the club's council has the opportunity to report to its members on the club's activities, finances, etc. So we will try to get through that in about 30 minutes, and then we'll go on with the remainder of our program tonight. Sure. Can we get volume up, Chris? Sure. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. People can hear me now? All right, so we'll get through the AGM in about 30 minutes or so is what it ought to take us. We'll have Dave Chisholm's report on Ottawa skies. I don't think he's here, so I may be giving it on his behalf. After the break, Brian McCullough will be taking us for his presentation on Apollo 8. Rick Wagner will be talking about the Messier Observing Certificate. We'll have observations, announcements, etc. All right. Here are new members this month. Stephen Danis, Mikhail Grinovich, and Catherine Mills. Welcome to the club. We've had 53 new members in 2018. All right, so without further ado, we'll get our 2018 annual general meeting started. And as is tradition, our president, Tim Cole, will be chairing. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, thank you. What's my button?
That advances, that takes you back.
Okay, first things first, when we issued the notice for the annual general meeting, we distributed the minutes for last year's meeting and the agenda. So you have no grounds for saying you didn't know it. Come on, there we go. So if we can adopt the agenda since it's been promulgated. Anybody move to approve the agenda? Fine, moved by somebody or other back there. Brian, and seconded by somebody else. Jack? Who? Odale. Chuck. Oh, Chuck. I thought I heard Jack. Oh, never mind. So you got a new name, Chuck. Now it's Jack. Never mind. Okay. Okay, so moved and seconded, so we have approved. Moving on, so. And vote? All in favor? All opposed? No, never mind. Fine, done. Next, minutes of last year's meeting. Yeah. Minutes of last year's meeting. Just to make sure, this was promulgated, I believe, Chris? The minutes?
Yes. Yep. Part of the notice.
Part of the notice. I was pretty sure it was. So, basically it was standard meeting stuff. And it was promulgated, so you had an opportunity. Motion to approve minutes? Someone, anyone? Somebody in the front who I can't see. Ah, it's Gordon. And seconded by? You go. Okay, perfect. Vote to accept the minutes of last year's. All in favor? All opposed? Carried. And carried on. President's report. There's an official president's report, but I'll try to kind of ad-lib it a bit. It's actually been a fairly good year, though I must say after doing a GA in 2017, it really seemed kind of non-eventful. Our outreach events are quite popular, but they continue to do well. We continue to have good attendance at it. The members-only star parties we've been setting up at the Fred Lawson Observatory also seem to be doing quite well. Speaking of the Fred Lossing Observatory, we have been making quite a few improvements to the place, and if you haven't been out in a while, you will really notice the difference. In addition to the 18-inch Starmaster that we installed last year, we are just on the verge of having a 14-inch SCT installed in its own dome. This will be available. We'll have the, any idea on our completion date for the SCT?
Basic dome should be in place by next weekend.
Yeah.
And the telescope in place, and then there's some operational.
Yeah, there's some operational issues. So,
I mean, for members.
So we're not looking a great deal down the road. We're looking like within a few months, hopefully, to get it done. That'll be available to key holders, and we're still trying to sort out, do we have separate key holder arrangements for the 14 and the 18 and all that sort of stuff, which I will leave to Mike. Never mind. We also have a larger mound available for setting up telescopes. There's a better parking area. And we've also improved the view to the south because we've had a lot of the trees that have been blocking out of the way. We are continuing to consider new improvements, and we'll be looking into that based on suggestions and just see how well what we've got is being used. We still continue to have a very good relationship with the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority, which it's a very significant thing for us. And it's useful to both of us, which gives us a very good feeling that we can look forward to that for quite some time to come. For those of you who remember the old 16-inch telescope, we're happy to report it will have a new home and will continue to be preserved. So that's a nice thing to see an old warhorse still with a stable to call home. We still have a good working relationship with the Canada Aviation and Space Museum, which we are we're right here. We're an affiliate of the museum, and one big advantage for that is that we have this venue in exchange for supporting the museum's astronomy-related outreach activities. And this is something that provides considerable value to the Ottawa Centre. Unfortunately, there is always mortality. We learned of the loss of Arthur Griffin in September 2017 after our last meeting, so we're a bit delayed. And in 2018, we'd lost Paul Commission, William Day, and Ian Halliday. So I hope you'll join me in paying some honor to their lives and achievements, and trying to keep the memories alive, which is about all we can really do. We have a pretty energetic club here, and it's always important in any energetic club to acknowledge members who've made outstanding contributions, and making an outstanding contribution in this bunch is no easy task, because we've got a lot of incredibly good people in this club. So it may sound like we're just singling out a few people, but Paul Sadler, our seemingly tireless Star Party coordinator, has introduced some much-needed innovations to how we go about handling Star Parties. In addition to doing some surveys to decide what members want out of Star Parties, he's also provided a pretty extensive analysis of how this year's Star Parties went, and has identified a lot of the tasks that we can now subdivide. And this should make it a lot easier for people to take on parts of the Star Party job. That's one of the things that we've been working on, is making sure that we can spread the burden out amongst people rather than staying, this guy, that's it, you're the man. We have to get around that, and Paul is definitely helping that with Star Parties. You have probably noticed that our website is stable and more attractive and more useful, and that is due to our webmaster, Mick Wilson, who has somehow managed to tame the web gremlins. It's still tricky, but Mick's really keeping up on it, and it's making it a very good and useful facility. Danil Polyakov has brought his talents much beyond his years to the challenging task of handling outreach activities. And he's made it possible for Ottawa Centre volunteers to share our mutual love of astronomy with groups throughout Ottawa and the surrounding area. A lot of these volunteers I will undoubtedly miss, but outstanding volunteers that we were able to put together a list of included Dave Chisholm, Jerry Shewan, Attila Danko, Ingrid DeBuda, and Kelly Jordan, and I apologize for those that we've missed. It's my aging brain and short memory. Gordon Webster, who has managed to keep our Astronauts newsletter interesting and relevant. I suspect it's as much to his ability to encourage and cajole contributors as to his considerable editorial skills. But he's also been very, very active with our member star parties at Flow and with the ongoing work in upgrading Flow. Our Flow co-directors, Dave Lozon and Rick Scholes, have been instrumental in making the observatory a facility we can really take pride in. Andrew Brown has also used his considerable abilities to help make our second observatory building a reality. As most of you have noticed, our monthly meetings are still quite popular and well attended, and a great deal of that success always falls on the meeting chair. Oscar, in addition to his role as the Ottawa Centre treasurer, has been doing a great job in bringing some top-notch speakers and also in reestablishing the popular Observers Challenge, the Observers Challenges. There are other aspects to the monthly meetings that make them special. When you get a chance to see our librarian, Estelle Rother, and find a gem in our center library. Outside, Art and Ann Fraser have coffee and other goodies ready for recaffeination and replenishment. And some of you have made use of the telescope library. Darren Weatherall is still working on keeping the telescopes in good shape and trying to get a better handle on what we have and what we should have in the library. Now, Chris Tarrant, who's hiding over here, received our first Ottawa Centre President's Award. You know him for his ongoing efforts in keeping the monthly meetings running smoothly, but he also does things that most people don't know about. On the org chart, he's the Ottawa Centre Secretary, but he's also our liaison with CASM, that's this place, the Centre's de facto historian and lore master, and the default host of council meetings. In addition to that, he's got a long history of acting as the Ottawa Centre's resident designer and builder. And over the last 2 years, Chris has put a lot of work into the planning and organization behind Flow upgrades and some of the literal heavy lifting with getting our new observatory set up. And his wife, Louisa, deserves considerable credit for that too. Now, the President's Award was something we created to have something available in our back pocket, something to honor somebody who's run out of awards. And I guess it shouldn't have surprised me that Chris would get the first one. While we're mentioning awards, Mike Mogadam, who isn't here this evening, received the 2018 KELAC Award. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, that's the RASC National Award for Outreach and Communications. Now, these aren't the only people who generously donate tremendous time and skills to the Ottawa Centre. All of you who volunteer your skills and your time and your efforts merit our gratitude, and this club cannot function without you. So thank you very much for everything that you're doing to help keep this place going. It has been an honor to have served as the president of the Ottawa Centre and to be associated with all of you folks. The Ottawa Centre is in good hands with the upcoming council, and I look forward to our club continuing to be a valuable part of our lives for some years to come. Clear skies, I am told they actually happen once in a while, and a good year to everybody. We are ready for the moment that you've all been waiting for, the Treasurer's Report. And Oscar, if you can treasure it.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I can only assume that you're all here just for this excitement.
Exactly. I am.
So I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. So we're going to go over the financial statements for the year ended September 30th, 2018. But before that, we had our books for the year ended September 30th, 2017, reviewed by David Parfait. And I'm happy to report that after his review of our statements, it is his opinion that the statements present fairly the financial position of the Centre as at September 30th, 2017. So thank you, David, once again for engaging in that undertaking. It's an important part of keeping our books clean. All right, so now for this year's books, we're going to start with our income statement. We had revenues totaling 13,158. Our cost of goods sold was 2,834. We had operating costs totaling 21,736, giving us a total loss for the year of 11,551. So I'll touch on that in a couple slides as to that figure and some reasons for it. Next, we'll go to our balance sheet. We had current assets of 58,996, capital assets of 20,036, giving us total assets of $79,002. Our current liabilities are $2,566, and retained earnings of $76,436, giving us total liabilities and equity of $79,002. All right, so we'll go. All right, so now I'll go over just a couple of things here. So profit loss. So as I mentioned when I was covering the income statement, we showed an operating loss of 11,551. So I just want to highlight that the loss was not largely from operating expenses, and it was mostly from one, depreciation, which was $2,460. And also a write-off expense for the building at SmartScope. So now that we've decommissioned that site, we had to remove the value of that building from our books, and that was about $5,385. So those two cover about some $8,000 of that $11,000 loss. So our operating expenses themselves, overall, year to year, have not changed very much for operating expenses that we would expect. We did have one or two expenses that were out of the ordinary, but nothing to be alarmed about. Next, investment. So we currently hold $38,000 in GIC investments, and a few of those matured this year, which yielded about $123 in interest. Big whoop. But we will be looking at better paying investments in the near future. It's something that I'm hoping to look at this year. But we do have guidelines from the CRA with regards to what we can and cannot invest in based on our charitable organization status. So FLO expenses, or the Fred Lossing Observatory as a whole. So we had some of the expenses that came up sort of in the last year were some improvements that we've made at FLO in terms of increasing the size of the dome. We purchased a sky shed pod for the SCT that's going in. So we're continuing to make some good investments there. Donations. So members made a total of $957 in charitable donations to the center. Thank you very much for your generosity. It really goes a long way to helping us pay for the things that we need to pay for. So thank you. So for those of you that have donated money to the center, you can expect to see your charitable tax receipts probably in mid-January to early February, assuming Canada Post doesn't go on strike again. Financial viability. So despite the fact that membership revenue was down slightly year over year, about 6%, operational expenses continue to be stable. We're not really spending more than we're bringing in, with the exception of some of the things I highlighted before. So, and given the fact that the club is currently making investments to expand FLO and improve FLO, it's my opinion that with continued responsible management of our financial resources, the club should remain financially viable. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Parfait has completed the review for 2016 to 2017, and it was his opinion that the books were clean, so that's great. And he has also agreed to be nominated to review our 2017-2018 financials. All right, does anyone have any questions? The 14-inch SCT that we're putting in there? No, it is not the. I'm sorry? It's currently in storage. I think it's stored at. Is it stored with you, Chris, right now?
Yep.
Oh, there you are. Yeah, so it's currently in storage. We've got to figure out what we're going to do with it. Yes, that's part of our assets. It's part of current assets. Yeah, or rather capital
We have
assets.
ideas of where it could be placed that we're working on.
But the current setup that we have out there, what we could easily obtain, or what we could reasonably obtain, really wasn't suitable for that large scope and mount. And we did have a very suitable SCT and mount that is going to good use in flow. So it seemed like rather a poor use of the SmartScope gear, considering the circumstances we had to work with out there. As Chris had mentioned, we are looking into some possibilities for using it. There's some negotiations that still have to be sorted out, but it's not been forgotten. It's something we're working on, and yeah. Yep.
We have the embarrassment of riches right now where we have two 14-inch SCTs donated to us. One from Paul Commission, which we still need to put to use, and the one that's going into to flow. And we also have the SmartScope equipment. So we've got these fantastic assets, and it's a question of where we best put them and where's member interest level. The SmartScope telescope would not be suitable from general member use at flow, but a 14-inch fork-mounted SCT would be ideally suited for flow. That's why it's gone there instead of SmartScope.
Okay. Any other questions pertaining to the financials? Nope. Going once, twice, sold. All right. So with that, I'd like to move to approve the financial statements for 2017-2018 as presented.
Moved by Paul Cloninger?
Oscar moved.
I moved, Paul seconded. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. Seconded, yeah.
All in favor? All right. So next, I'd like to motion to appoint David Parfait as our auditor for the 2017-2018 financials. Yes. Can I get someone to second that motion? Gordon Webster. All in favor? All right. Looks like it's carried. And thank you again, David, if you're in the audience. I don't know if you are. All right, and I'll hand it back to Mr. Cole.
Thank you. Even though my dad is dead, that's Mr. Cole. Never mind, it's an old line. Okay, election of officers, councilors, natural council reps. Well, after sorting out all the people racing to take the positions, we have our current slate, as you can see up there. Now, something to bear in mind. We do have a new president and director, and I am happy to report a new past president. I'm very happy to report a new past president. Honestly, it has been, I'm glad I've done it, and I'm glad I'm done it. Really, it's an interesting thing to do. I'm glad to have served, and I've done my bit for a while. Oh, bugger yourself. I'm still the president. Take him out and keel-haul him. Or flog him or something. Anyway, now you'll notice here that we have the meeting chair open. Now, this is because Oscar's sulking. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Oscar has made it clear that he's not jumping ship, hence the keel hauling. However, he would very much like to have somebody take over the meeting chair task. It is, to do the two tasks, both treasurer and meeting chair, it's a lot. And we really would like to have somebody take on the meeting chair job. We can certainly help you out, help sorting it out. That's not going to be a big issue. There's plenty of ability available. There's a number of ex-meeting chairs just sitting in this room right now, all of whom can provide you some good help with that. So please give it a thought and let us know if you're interested in taking on that task. The other thing you'll notice is we have only one of our 2 National Council rep positions filled. So that is another task that we'd very much like to have taken care of. If you have any interest, please let us know. And that should pretty much cover it. So do try to help out where you can. So congratulations to our new council. I see we're still in the dark on our light pollution coordinator. Yeah, I know. I'll go hide now. Membership, Art Fraser, Darren Weatherall for the Lone Library, coffee, cookies, and recaffeination, Art and Ann. David Lozon and Rick Scholes are continuing with Flow. Gordon Webster is continuing to run Astronauts. I don't think Mick's here this evening, but he's... Oh, you are there. You're not hiding. Perfect. Mick has agreed to continue being our webmaster and de-gremlinifying our website. Well, you did now. You're in. And Estelle Rother is still looking after our library. Our President's Award. I should point out that the President's Award, by the way, despite its title, it's got its title because we couldn't think of a better title. But it's actually not done at the discretion of the President, but awarded by Council. In this case, trying to keep a secret from Chris is incredibly difficult because he sets up all the meeting slides and keeps all the minutes and files all the reports. So we did short circuit a bit of it for this one. We did not think that the Council would consider it terribly amiss to do so. Basically, the citation reads, "In grateful recognition for many outstanding contributions to the RASC Ottawa Centre," I outlined a few of them. So our inaugural President's Award, Chris Tarrant, get your butt up here. There you go. There is a well-deserved President's Award.
Next slide.
Next slide? Okay. No, what the heck? We're going to go back to this one for a while. Okay. Do you want to look after this, Paul? Oscar, so I'll turn over to you for the next few bits.
All right. So the 2018 Paul Commission Observer of the Year Award. So this award goes to a member who has been consistent in his or her observations. So I had several submissions this year, and this particular member impressed me with their work, both in the detail that they kept in their logs with regards to instruments used, sky conditions, etc., but as well as with sort of the tenacity that they went at with their observations, testing, always sort of testing the limits of what's possible with amateur equipment. So without further ado, this year's Paul Commission Observer of the Year Award goes to Paul Cloninger.
Thank you,
Congratulations,
Oscar.
Paul.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for those of you that missed the annual dinner meeting, we did give out some of these awards at that meeting, so this is some of it is a recap. All right. Oh, there it is. So this is a new award, the Rolf Meyer Award for Planetary Observing. In this part of the world, planetary observing is quite a challenging thing to do. We don't have, we frequently don't have clear skies, and when we do, the seeing's usually pretty terrible. But this particular member really kept at it, and you could see their work improving every single time that they presented an observation here. They even went as far as to go to quite a lengthy road trip to try to capture the transit of Mars this year. So the 2018 and inaugural Rolf Meyer Award for Planetary Observing goes to Taras Rybarski. Did I go to? Congratulations, Taras. I need to learn how to work this slide thing.
You taught me.
All right. The 2018 Best Presentation of the Year Award. So this one, so we had quite a few great presentations over the last 12 months. So this was a tough one to decide. But this year's presentation, or this year's winner, goes to a presentation that I thought was really creative, and really brought back memories of a rather special event from the year before that. So this year's winner is I clicked it. Is Doug Loama for his presentation Solar Town Eclipse 2017. Okay. And we'll save this one for Doug because I don't think he's here.
We'd mail it, but
All right, and I think Gordon, you want to come up and award this one?
Thanks, Oscar. Okay, so I've been editor of the Astronauts now for almost a year. Which one is it? Green one?
The right arrow.
Right arrow, okay. And I've been a reader of Astronauts for over a decade. And there have always been many really great articles. I mean, there have been things from biographies to extremely scientific reports, some of which go way over my head, and even a novella. But few of the articles have moved me as much as the one that I've chosen for Article of the Year. This article captures something that I think all of us have felt, and it tells its story in a very poetic and simple prose. The Hug by Stuart Glenn tells the story of sharing the night sky with a first-time observer at one of our CARP star parties, and its effect on both the observer and on Stuart. I seriously hope Stuart keeps sending us more articles. Are you here, Stuart? No. Okay. Yeah.
It goes back to you, Tim.
other business. Is there any other business that needs to be discussed? Anybody? I do believe it was raised, we had some discussion on Smart School. I saw a hand back there. Yeah.
Just wondering about memberships. Did we lose memberships this year?
Good question. I don't know.
The number is fairly static at about 360, 370 members.
One of the things that has changed was that we had noticed changing is we're now having more family memberships than single. We're getting an increase in family memberships over single memberships, and for that we receive a small amount less. It seems like a good thing, mind you. I mean, to have a family involved, but we don't get the same amount that we do from a single membership, and so all you family people, stop it. No, come on, stick a crowbar in your wallet. Each one of you become a regular member. But
in the
seriously.
last few years, we've had a noticeable increase in the youth membership.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful to see.
All
A lot of that credit going to Kelly Jordan in the last year.
Yeah. So all silliness aside, though, I mean, a family membership's a good thing, and youth memberships are a good thing. We do bring in a few less dollars to the center, but to my mind, it's a worthwhile thing. We still don't have any problems keeping the place running, and we'll worry about that when it looks like it's coming up. Anybody else? Anybody? Anybody? Oh, yeah, fire away.
Okay. I was under the impression that we had a remote site that we can tap into electronically.
On the national base?
Via computer or whatever.
Yeah, the only one that we have heard anything about is the National Robotic Telescope. And if you've read the December bulletin, you know exactly as much as anybody else here does. We're waiting to see what words we get from National on that. I get the impression they're still testing. We'll just have to wait and see what they have to say about it.
Okay.
I'd like to give you a better answer, but we don't have one.
And we have nothing at Shirley's.
No, that was the SmartScope facility, which is now decommissioned, and the equipment is looking for a new home, and we are working on that new home.
Is there a reason for the decommissioning?
Among other things, is there a reason for the decommissioning? Among other things, Shirley's Bay has drastically changed its policies regarding security and site access. Site stewardship is, I don't know if it has yet or if it's in the process, but is shifting over to the Department of National Defense instead of Communications Research Center, which makes a huge difference in access. Among other things, there is an extreme possibility that we would have been looking at rent, which we never had before. So we decided that trying to keep things working at Shirley's Bay was becoming a really untenable problem, and if you roll in paying market rent, it becomes a no-brainer. We got to get out. Anybody else?
The SmartScope building is going to be abandoned or is it being taken down?
Seriously, we have offered the building to CRC. I don't believe we've heard anything back on that. Neither have we heard whether or not it has to be taken down. So with any luck, the wheels of bureaucracy in the government will continue to turn as they always do, hopefully with as much efficiency as the Phoenix payroll system, and we can forget about taking the thing down for the foreseeable future. Seriously speaking, though, it seems reasonable that they may want to take the building over. And if they really do insist that we take it down, we'll have no choice but to do it. But we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed on that. We have not heard back. We looked at that, and I don't believe the dome is in salvageable state.
The dome is fine, and it could find another purpose, but if it stays with the existing building and means that we can transfer the entire building to CRC, we'd be much better off than trying to remove it and needing a shell and having to incur the expense of removal. There's a non-astronomy use being anticipated by DRDC that requires a fiberglass dome roof, and we're hoping they'll take it over for that.
So I stand corrected on that one. I had thought there was no chance and no...
The dome is functional. We've never liked it, but it is there.
But is there not a problem with disassembling it, or is that... Okay, so I'm totally out to lunch on that one. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Anybody else? Aw, beginning to think you don't love me. Okay, no other business?
Next slide, adjourn.
Next slide. Move to adjourn, please.
Rick was quick to put his hand up.
Yeah, I noticed that. We are now adjourned. The annual general meeting is over, and you may now wake up and proceed with the rest of Oscar's interesting meeting. Seriously, all gags aside, the annual general meeting is an important thing, and it's part of running a club. So we are going to try it. We want to get through it in reasonable dispatch. Okay, everybody, I'll turn this back to Oscar, and I shall promptly disappear. Oh, now I get applause.
All right. So I guess now we go back to our regularly scheduled programming. So thank you, Tim, for your service over the last 2 years. You've done a fantastic job.
Seriously, I'm glad to have done it. Happy to turn it over to somebody else.
All right. So I don't think Dave is here, so I'm going to be speaking to his slides on his behalf. As always, he's put together a great slide deck for this month's skies. All right, so the full moon is December 22nd. Let's see, on December 12th, so comet 46P Wirtanen. On December 12th, the comet will be at its closest to the sun. On December 16th, it will be closest to the Earth at a distance of about 11.5 million kilometers. Astronomers are anticipating that by then, as it will only have been a couple of days after its closest approach to the sun, the comet will brighten to naked eye visibility. Although from what I heard from Paul, it was naked eye just a couple days ago. So that sounds pretty cool. Let's see if it brightens up anymore and produces some great views. Ooh. It's going crazy on me. There we go. The Geminids meteor shower is on December 13th and 14th, or the night of December 13th, 14th. The Geminids is the king of meteor showers. It is considered by many to be the best shower in the heavens, producing up to 120 multicolored meteors per hour at its peak. It is produced by the debris left behind by an asteroid known as 3200 Phaethon, which was observed in 1982. The shower runs annually from December 7th to 17th. It peaks this year on the night of the 13th and the morning of the 14th. The first quarter moon will set shortly after midnight, leaving dark skies for what should be an excellent early morning show. Best viewing will be from a dark location after midnight, and meteors will radiate from the constellation Gemini but can appear anywhere in the sky. The Ursid meteor shower. The Ursid meteor shower is a minor meteor shower producing only about 5 to 10 meteors per hour. It is produced by dust grains left behind by Comet Tuttle, which was first discovered in 1790. The shower runs annually from December 17th through the 25th, and it peaks this year on the night of the 21st and morning of the 22nd. This year, the glare from the full moon will hide all but the brightest meteors. If you're extremely patient, you might still be able to catch a few good ones. Best viewing will be just after midnight from a dark location far away from city lights. Meteors will radiate from the constellation Ursa Minor, but can appear anywhere in the sky. Wow, this one's just loaded with meteor showers. The Quadrantids is an above-average shower with up to 40 meteors per hour at its peak. It is thought to be produced by dust grains left behind by an extinct comet known as 2003 EH1, which was discovered in 2003, ironically enough. The shower runs annually from January 1st through 5th. It peaks this year on the night of the 3rd and the morning of the 4th. The moon will be a thin crescent and should not interfere with what could be a good show this year. Best viewing will be from a dark location after midnight, and meteors will radiate from the constellation Boötes, but can appear anywhere in the sky. All right, Mercury. Look for it just before sunrise in the eastern sky. Venus is visible in the early morning. Mars visible first part of the evening. Jupiter is not visible at all. Saturn is visible the first part of the evening, the first half of the month. Uranus is visible all night. Neptune is visible all evening. And here's Insight's first picture from Mars. All right, so thank you, Dave, wherever you are. All right, so we were going to go to break after this, but I think we'll move right into Brian's presentation. Brian?
Can I give you that little intro? Get my stuff set up.
Sure. So Brian McCullough was a past president and member since 1989. He is a two-time Observer of the Year. in 2001 for observations of Pluto, and 2006 for a 10-minute moon series. He was the chair of the 2017 General Assembly. And if I hadn't been told otherwise, I'd be convinced that he was from the moon. So if we could give Brian a warm welcome. And we'll just we'll wait for him to set up there since we sort of changed the program.
So Oscar,
out from under.
are you able to advance slides for me?
I am, absolutely. Do we need the lapel mic, Chris? Is it down here? Oh, you've got it?
I've got it here.
Perfect.
All right. Oh, I sound like, okay, we're on. I'm just gonna move this over. And we're good to go. All right. I'll set this here. Well, good evening, everybody. It's been a few days since I've seen this slide, so this should be a nice surprise for all of us. 50 years ago, the Apollo 8 astronauts went to the moon. It was the first time that humans had left, had gone any farther away from the Earth than about 1,200 nautical miles. And there they went 240,000 nautical miles out into space and looped around the moon. If you got your Sky News for November, December, there's a little article on the Apollo 8 mission in there. So what I wanted to talk about was just my connection with Apollo 8, because for me, that was the start. That was the start of everything. Even though my father had taken me out watching, looking at some of the early satellites going over, it was I got my interest in the moon as the Apollo missions were gearing up. And at the end of the evening, I have a couple of Apollo artifacts to show people here. Does anybody have the controller? Can you control it next? Okay, we'll go to the next one, please. So right about now, in I think it's Mississauga Center, Andrew Chapin, who wrote this definitive book on the Apollo missions, is doing a presentation in Mississauga Center right there. But I have to say that I'm glad I'm here and not there. This is where I'd rather be. We'll go to the next one, please. All right, so Apollo 8. The Apollo missions were, of course, sending people to the moon. That was the whole idea, was to do a moon landing. In 1968, the lunar lander was not ready from Grumman Corporation. So what the program director, George Lowe, did, he said, let's make this bold move. We're going to send astronauts to the moon without a lunar lander. But what they had was they had a test article on board that was the same mass as the lander, so that all the targeting and trajectory and everything would be, they could calculate that properly. So on December, I think it was 21st, 1968, they lifted off. They had a 120-meter tall rocket, 363 feet, something like that. And so the whole stack came down here, and the astronauts were sitting in this little cone-shaped command module right up at the top here. And off they went. So they blasted off, went into Earth orbit, and did a couple of hours in Earth orbit, just to check all the systems, make sure that everything was ready to go. And this is the first time they were going to be reigniting their second stage engine. That's what they need to do once they're in Earth orbit, 17,500 miles an hour, just so they don't fall back to the Earth. Then they had to boost themselves up to 25,000 miles an hour. They lit that engine, everything worked, and as their path here shows, they're going to loop off and head off to the moon. So off they went. So as soon as they did their burn, they got themselves launched with escape velocity, or near escape velocity, and off they went. And when they got about 2/3 of the way to the moon, or more than that, then the gravity of the moon was stronger than the pull of the Earth. And of course, they were just coasting at that point, and then they started speeding up again. And then on Christmas Eve, 1968, they looped into orbit around the moon. They circularized the orbit, and over 20 hours, Christmas Eve into early Christmas morning, they did 10 orbits of the moon. Now, I was living in the United States at the time in New Jersey. My father was with the Royal Canadian Air Force. We were on posting down there. I remember standing out in the backyard, looking up at the moon, and thinking, there are people in orbit around the moon right now. And I couldn't get this through my head. It was such a fascinating, exciting thing. And this is what kept me excited and supercharged all the time. So they go into orbit, they read from the Bible, right? They read from the first, 5 verses of Genesis. It was great theater. for people back on Earth, but they left people with this sentiment at the end. And when they signed off on that broadcast, and they said, wished people a good night to all the good people on the good Earth. So you could tell there was a bit of wistfulness there. All right, go to the next one, please. So here they go. So they're cramped in this tiny little spacecraft. There's Mission Commander Frank Borman. Next to him is Jim Lovell, who also went on to command Apollo 13. So he went to the moon twice and never landed. All right? And Bill Anders was the lunar module pilot. We'll go to the next one. All right? Great diagram. They did the loop. All right? Blast off, went in orbit, and as the moon's going around, then finally they would blast off and come back to Earth. We'll go to the next one, please. All right? So here's the Apollo 8 command module. This is the actual spacecraft that they rode. So out of all that 120 meter stack, the only thing that came back to Earth, of course, was the small command module. And what I'd like you to notice is at the bottom, of course, is what's called an ablative heat shield. So it was a gooped-on compound that, as they're doing their fiery re-entry through the atmosphere, parts of it would burn away and ablate, so it would carry the heat away from the spacecraft. Our museum, the Science and Tech Museum, used to have the Apollo 7 spacecraft, which just went into Earth orbit to test out. Remember, there was the Apollo 1 fire in 1967, 3 astronauts died on board. So a lot of things got changed, including the way the hatch was designed for quicker escape, that type of thing. So when they took Apollo 7 up, the astronauts who were monitoring the development of that, the redevelopment of that spacecraft, were the ones to fly it. They said, we managed it all through development, we'll fly it ourselves. That was the plan. So that Apollo 7 command module was at the Science and Tech Museum for quite a number of years, and now it's down in Houston. But when they moved that Apollo 7 spacecraft out of the museum, little bits of I was working at the museum at the time, little bits of the ablative heat shield crumbled off. And I have some of that to show you. All right, let's go to the next one, please. All right, so there's Mission Commander Frank Borman. The interesting thing to notice about this is when they're flying in this spacecraft, it wasn't easy. They had lots of room to move around, right? They're on a 3-day journey to the moon. It took them 68 hours to travel to the moon. They're floating around in there. They got space sick. Before, in Mercury and Gemini, they're strapped in their seats. You can't really move around too much, so you weren't getting disoriented so much. Frank Borman had quite a number of issues with being sick in every way you can imagine. Inside of that spacecraft was not a comfortable place, wasn't a comfortable environment. But the three of them persevered and went on and did a great mission. We'll go to the next one, please, Oscar. But I love this spacecraft. I mean, look at this. I mean, who doesn't want to build one of these in their basement? But the way this works, I mean, the cone command module will go up like this. So imagine you've got a gumdrop, a little chocolate gumdrop, sitting on the table. You'd have the 3 astronauts lying on their backs at the bottom of the gumdrop, with their legs kind of sticking up. If they wanted to take out the center seat, they could crawl underneath the control panel and stand up on the other side. So now they're standing up toward the top of the cone. If we go to the next picture, please. There's Jim Lovell. He's come down through the middle of the seats, and now he's using the space, or his telescope to navigate. He's using guide stars to navigate with. So they've got a compass on board, they've got guide stars. So I mean, they're using simple instruments. We go to the next one. And they got themselves to the moon. Their targeting was phenomenal. The little mid-course corrections they did, everything was spot on. And this is what we saw on TV. This crappy image will look a bit better on the TV, but not much better. And it was unbelievable. They're at the moon. They're at the moon. We'll go to the next one, please. So now Bill Anders, I mean, you can see how cramped they are. There's just one, and that's how tight it was in there. So they're looping around the moon. They're taking photographs out the window. And then if we go to the next one, you're photographing the surface. Now to me, this was phenomenal. To see the moon like this, this is a great thing. Well, how did I look at the moon before? Naked eye with my dad's binoculars, trying to see what I could see. We go to the next one. And then on one of the orbits they came around, Bill Anders says, wow. He starts shooting with a black and white camera. And he says, give me the color. Loads of color magazine, bang, bang, bang. Earthrise. They saw that there's a whole series of photographs where you see Earth rising above the horizon. No one had ever seen this before. Now, Lee McDonald had reminded me to say that the line that they said was they went to the moon to discover the moon, but what did they discover instead? The Earth. And I say, well, that's fine. Earth, big, blue, and wet. I didn't care about that. This is what I cared about, seeing those close-up views of the moon. Right? The photographs that came back from that were amazing. Life magazine published a bunch of those. Let's go to the next one, please. Right? But while they're doing that, of course, they're sweating bullets. They were there 20 hours, orbiting the moon. They're sweating bullets because now they have to relight their small service propulsion system engine, because they abandoned the other booster. They had to light this guy off again. If that didn't work, they would stay in lunar orbit forever, and eventually that would decay probably, and they would, well, we don't need to say any more about that. And right on the mark, and where they would light it off, because where it had to be lit to get the boost started to make their proper trajectory for the homeward bounder, the trans-Earth injection burn had to be done on the dark side of the moon. Dark side meaning dark radio. Radio silence on the far side of the moon. So people were waiting. They didn't know if the burn would work until all of a sudden the spacecraft pops in from around the edge of the moon, and they're on their way home in the early hours of Christmas morning. Now on Christmas morning, Chris, do you have that light, please? So Christmas morning, there was a long, narrow box under the Christmas tree with my name on it. And it was this guy right here. This is my Sears Discoverer 60mm refracting telescope. The box said something like 450 times magnification, see the rings around Saturn. Of course, what they didn't know at the time, 450 times magnification with 60mm opening doesn't really let in a lot of light. You'd have to have this stacked out, the Barlow lens in place. It came out to here, it was wobbly. I could barely see the full moon through it. I didn't know that then. And besides, which one was Saturn? So it wasn't actually until I joined the Navy and was navigating with other instruments, not an astrolabe, but with a sextant. So just like Jim Lovell was using a telescope and a sextant and a compass, that's what I used at sea. So it's kind of a warm connection there. But this is the telescope that I got for Christmas. And this was a big purchase for my family. And it wasn't until many years later that somebody from the RASC, Dave Robinson, told me about the RASC. I knew nothing about this. I knew nothing about astronomy clubs. I used to know about Sky and Telescope. I used to read that. And then that's actually how I met Dave Robinson. I used to see him on the bus. And then so we got talking astronomy. And he of course, he says, he had a big C8 telescope and some of that. And he says, oh, he said, I see you've got an interest in astronomy. You're reading Sky and Telescope. I said, yeah, actually, I've got a 60mm refracting telescope at home. It was in a box in the cupboard. Because I'd been away to sea and, well, you know, and da-da-da-da-da-da. So he says, so what have you been looking at? Oh, well, not too much. Anyway, he kept asking me this. He was very annoying for the first 3 days of that bus, you know, when I was seeing him on the bus. He kept asking me, oh, it was nice and clear last night. Did you see Saturn? Oh, no, I think I was doing my hair that night. I don't know. So anyway, so he shamed me into it. I set up my telescope again, and just the smell, opening up the box, like the smell of the old lubricants on here, and I didn't put my little finder scope on here, but just the smell of the wooden tripod and putting it all back, it brought back my memories of using this guy to look at the moon, like on Christmas night, when the Apollo 8 astronauts were on their way back, riding this little baby home from the moon. I thought, how wonderful. Let's go to the next one. That's more or less what I got. Had a wrapping on it, and I have them here, some of the little pieces that I had in here, they had the little screw-in eyepiece filters. One for the moon, nice and green, another one even darker green for the sun. Right, as we learn, as we go on, as we talk to people in the clubs. those things, if you're letting so much heat through this telescope, and you're putting a little filter, like 2.5 inches from your eye, there's a lot of, and focusing the light there, they crack. So you can have accidents with that. So as we all know, have a proper filter across the whole front end of your telescope, right? Take your finder scope off. All right. So that's what I had. Let's go to the next one, please. This is the spot where we bring the spotlight on. You like the way I timed that, Chris? Okay, let's go to the next one, please. All right. So here I was. So I was in the Navy, so I didn't use my telescope for some time, but I was navigating. We'll go to the next one. Navigating with things like this. This is the star globe that I would use. So you have to go into the nautical almanac, and you have to do all kinds of calculations to figure everything, so you can get the right ascension and the declination of. Well, I shot some bright object with my sextant. What is it? You have to go do all these calculations and you find out, oh my God, it's Pollux. Of course, what I know now is, if I were teaching my navigators how to navigate now, I'd give them a 5-minute tutorial with a star chart and how to star hop. It takes you 2 seconds. You need to fool with this. Of course, and there's a section that I would use, magnetic compass, and also a gyro compass that I would use. Of course, all these, you know where all these pieces are, right? In the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic in Halifax. Let's go to the next one. Right? So these are the instruments that I ended up using. Got my observatory in the backyard, Bright Star Observatory. Got my map of the moon back there, an 11-inch telescope, C11. Right? I didn't want any computer controls on it. It took me quite a while to find one. Without computer controls, as I used to tell people, I had enough annoyance with computers in my work. I didn't need the annoyance of the computer in my observatory, so computers are banned from there. We'll go to the next one. Right? But once I got started, having joined the RASC, and a whole world opened up to me. I talked to guys like early people, talking to guys like Doug George, Dave Robinson, and learning as I went along. So I would start doing, I did a little course on astronomy by correspondence with a Liverpool university. Right? Making my little sketches, making some notes, calculating different things. It was all very technical. I loved it. Right? Sometimes I'd just be making quick sketches like this. It was for fun, and for quick reference. Next one. Sometimes I'd see crazy things. Look at this face. 1 eye, 2 eyes, and a mouth. And there it is right there. 1 eye, and right? Let's go to the next one. Just doing my hand at sketching, starting to do some sketching. So, and then I would teach people, share how I would be doing it, building up a sketch. In this case, the crater Gassendi in Mare Humorum. And I started presenting on the things that I observed. So I would talk about, here's crater Julius Caesar, there's my sketch of it, there's my presentation suit, Julius Caesar, right? When in Rome, might as well make something out of it. I like theater. Let's go to the next one, Oscar. Right? But I would do things. I'm trying to make things simple for people to follow. This is the way I would discover things on the moon. There's the Northern Gateway, all right? Going from Mare Serenity across to Mare Imbrium, the Sea of Rains here. So I would give names to places, make them familiar. So down here, I made something like a tube line on the London Tube, the Southern Line. So then bang, 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 bang. These were just stops along the line. And it started making it easier to remember. Let's go to the next one, please. There are other ways to make things make sense. We don't have any frames of reference on the moon. When we look at the moon, okay, so here's the crater Aristarchus, that nice bright white patch if you're looking at the full moon, upper left. All right? When you look at it, it's a fresh crater, lots of light color on it, but the depth of it, 3 kilometers. This shot's taken from an orbiter 70 kilometers to the east of Aristarchus at an altitude of 25 kilometers. That's a telephoto shot into it. So there it is, 3 kilometers deep, and I put a little picture of the Parliament buildings in there just so you can see for reference how deep we're talking. Let's go next one. Right? So I would do simple things like this. Just a little outline. Here's Mare Imbrium, right? And here's the Sea of Serenity, so there's my northern gateway. But then I was noticing things when I started doing this series, this 10-minute moon series, just to quickly share little bits that I was doing. I discovered things, this is in 2002, I actually discovered a lunar crop circle right here. That's what I did. I did a presentation on lunar crop circles. And the whole point of it was little faint circular objects which are vestiges of craters or whatever they are. And just so we can, another interesting way of looking at things. We'll go to the next one, please. So then I'm looking at, this is my version of imaging. So you guys who do proper imaging, I'm looking at Andrew, Terrace, all you guys, okay, don't look. My bad photography. But then I thought, okay, then I would do a negative of it on my computer just to see, can I see more? Oh yes, you can actually see some other detail. And then you go to the next one, and then I've done a whole series of photographs as the sunrise passed, opened up across Mare Imbrium, across Sinus Iridum, this cutout. There's Plato. So here's the, so the shadow moved across from here to here to here to here. And my photographs were every which way. And so what I was thinking, oh, we could make this a little animation. So Tim put it together, except what I didn't realize was with my camera, the lens aimed this way, then that way, then that way, then that way, then that way. It took him a horrendous amount of time to flatten, to make everything kind of look the same. So we ended up with a 15-second movie or whatever it is of the sunrise. But it took him hours to do this. So I did a presentation about this, about what I had seen. He did a presentation on actually how he did the work to flatten. So it made a nice dual presentation. We'll go to the next one, please. Okay. This is how I want to see the moon. No kidding. I mean, yes, I said I like to see all that nice dark surface that we had here. This is how I really want to see the moon. When people put the false color into it, so you can start to see some of the other geological, selenographic details here. But I can't really see it like this, so if we go to the next one. So I make my own. So my meteor impact experiment, right, because I do a lot of teaching, going out to see groups. So I've got pans of flour, and what you know the old deal, right? What do? You put a pan of flour, you fill it with sprinkle of cocoa on top, then you throw a marble into it, and you get the impact, and the white flour splashes across the top of the cocoa. Except that for me, I can't eat chocolate. It makes kidney stones of me, right? So I was ingesting so much chocolate from the cocoa powder flying in the air, I thought, oh, this is not good. I think I better use paint instead. It said it was non-toxic. So what I did was I would set up my sheet, and I put my pans, my tin plates down, fill them with flour, and I put different colored dry powdered tempera paint on. So now what we're doing, okay, so now we do our impact. I let the kids use the marbles, and I had a croquet ball for the end, for that one. We go to the next one. So now what I can get is, and it's useful this way, and I would leave little crinkles in my paper on the floor so that we can get, just like on the surface of the moon, so you might see a color that shoots across and it's interrupted for a bit and it comes across, so you see shadow zones from impacts. But the main thing here is I talk to people about it's the order of impacts is important. So how can we tell what happened first here? Aha. So we see there's black, blue, and orange. Okay, so 3 different impacts. Over here we can see there's orange on top of the black. So we know the orange came after that. Here's black on top of the blue. There's blue on top of the orange. So now we can order the events that created this. But the interesting thing was, and this is why you want to be able to talk to people and visit with people. Okay, so here's a guy in England. Took his camera, West Yorkshire Astronomical Society, and Marcel Hodinga, and he went down and he took a low-angle shot. I think if we go to the next one. Right? This is what I had normally been looking at. We'd be looking at things this way. But he's told me, okay, go ahead. Let's look at it this way. I think we can kill that spotlight just for now, please, Chris. So he put his camera down low. And we go to the next one. And again, I think there's, I don't know if there's one more or not. Try that one. Is there another one? Oh, okay. So, but the whole point was, and he took his phone, and somebody else on this side of the pond, actually took his phone and walked it along in video mode, and it was like flying across the surface of the moon just like the Apollo 8. It was phenomenal. But I like doing the moon in different ways to make it accessible to people. So did a presentation one time at the Science and Tech Museum, made it out of marshmallows, mini marshmallows. So I soaked a bunch in, this was in the days before I was using my colored tempera paint, so I was still working with cocoa. So I soaked a bunch in a bag with cocoa, and then I had the white one, so what I did was you can see the moon, and it actually matches up, I'm wearing a moon ring too, so it actually matches up to my moon ring. Let's go next one, please. Do it different ways. Let people do their own hand. So here we have the moon map. There's Gordon getting us started with some of the early sketching. Now other people come in, do their coloring on there. Right? So it's great when you have people helping you out. In fact, just for helping, Tommy, are you going to come help me for a second, please? So just before we put the light out here, I wanted to come help me here for a minute. Tommy said he would give me a hand. I wanted just to tell you about how when the Apollo astronauts splash down, of course, the only thing that's left when they come down, yikes, cake, is this tiny little, and I'm going to get you to hold it. Can you hold this parachute wide like that? Hold it wide, wide, wide. All right, hold it as high as you can. Turn this way so everybody can see you. So the Apollo spacecraft would be at the bottom of this, but there were 3 parachutes that had big, 3 giant parachutes like that. And let's bring it down to the Earth. So it come down, 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 down like this. So it come, and do you know where it splashed down? Where would the spacecraft? Where's a good place for a spacecraft to land? On the moon. That's right. Like it's a moon to land. But when they came back to Earth, they landed in the ocean. Let's see if this works. Let's throw this up. We're going to see if this works. Here, let me have this. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's see if this works. There you go. Okay. Thank you. You can take that home? Oh, okay. Excellent. Thank you. All right, let's go to the next one, please. So that's the whole point of it. So here we're just getting close to the end here. So the whole thing here is, this is from the Apollo 17 mission. It's my daughter, Emily. She's an astronomer, lives in Newfoundland right now. Expecting the first grandkid in January. Thank you. So here's the most famous guy I never met. This is Harrison Schmitt. They call him Jack Schmitt. He was the only scientist to go to the moon. Apollo 17, the very last of the missions, 1972. So this is him at University of Western Ontario, Western University, doing a presentation. And my daughter Emily said, oh, before this happened, 2 weeks before he was coming, this is a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, 2 weeks before, I'm talking to Tim. I said, you know what? I'm getting to that point. If an Apollo astronaut, like a moon lander or Apollo astronaut, comes anywhere within 5 hours of whatever, I'm going. I'm just going to. So then 2 weeks later, Emily says, hey, Dad, you remember, guess what? Guess who's coming to Western? Jack Schmitt. Holy smokes. But the timing, I was on the West Coast. I'd be on the West Coast at a technical conference. I could have flown back and landed in Toronto and then gone to London, but the timing would have had to been bang, 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 bang. And I thought, oh, all it takes is one missed connection, an hour's delay in a flight. She'd be frantic. So I said, you know what? I'm going to send you a picture of me doing a meteor impact experiment, and because I would talk about the experiments that he used to do on the moon. So like that meteor impact experiment and different things that I would talk to people about. So I sent Emily photographs to show Jack Schmitt. I said, you go and you be the eyes for us. All right? So it took all the pressure off that way, and it worked out perfectly. So that's him looking at my meteor impact experiment with the daughter. All right? Let's go to the next one, please. Right? I had my chance to see Apollo, to see some of the Apollo samples. At Western, Emily's a good buddy, Anne-Marie, a geologist, was working with the Apollo thin slices. So they took samples of the moon rocks, sliced them up, and she's looking at them, and you can see they're using different polarizations of light to look at them. So there I'm holding something there. I mean, I've got some moon dust that came from a little bit of a lunar meteorite that got chipped off the moon by an impact and landed on the Earth. There I'm holding a piece that an astronaut went, like Jack Schmidt, went and scooped up, put in a collection bag, hauled it up on the hoist to put in the spacecraft, battened down the hatches, abandoned all their other gear there, blasted off, came down, just like Tommy was showing us how the command module came down onto the parachute, and then they picked it up and the spacecraft put it on an aircraft carrier, took the boxes of moon rocks out, took them to Houston to the Lunar Receiving Laboratory. That's what I'm holding. It was great. We'll go next one, please. But I mean, 40 years, 50 years since Apollo 8, and since 1972, no one's been to the moon. No one's been to the moon. I mean, we should have, to my mind, we should have had this by now. But for now, I'm just going to have to make do with figuring out my own spacecraft window in my observatory. There's the Apollo 7 spacecraft. And you do what you can with what you got. But for me, the moon, the Apollo 8 mission, that really got me inspired. The Apollo missions got me inspired about the moon, and it's been my favorite object to not only just to observe, but to share with other people. I think we're there. You can start your own program. RASC, Rick's going to talk about some of the observing certificates, the Messier certificate. Here's another certificate that they have. It's the Explorer of the Moon. And we'll go to the next one. You know what that is, eh? So this is the bottom of the saucer. So the saucer, the little coffee saucer is like this. This is the part in the middle where your cup sits. And I used to take it when I was making Melita coffee. I used to take the cone filter. So after you pour the water through it, and now you gotta, where am I gonna put the cone? Put it down on the saucer. And then I ripped it off one day. That's what was left on the saucer. My man in the moon. So sometimes you just never know. So anyway, afterward, if you want, I've got a couple of artifacts to show you some lunar dust. I have some Kapton foil that came off the only lunar module that was supposed to fly but didn't fly. And some of the heat shield from Apollo 7, plus some other stuff to show you there. Tommy, thank you again for your help there. All right? Good job, man. All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian.
Oh, and I'll just say one last thing. I got this cool, leave the start. I've got this cool little flashlight at, I won't remember the name of it. There's a toy store like what is it? Mastermind Toys, thank you. All right, so you adjust the lens here to do that. So I've got one for Tommy, and I'm going to put one in as a door prize.
Whoa. All right, thanks very much, Brian. All right, so we're going to go to break. Looks like we're running about 10 minutes behind, so let's make it a short break. Let's take 10 minutes, and it's 8:48. Let's meet back up at 8:58. All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to continue with the second half of the meeting. Rick is going to give us a presentation on the RASC Observing Program, the Messier list. Rick, take it away.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Wasn't this a lovely day today, all that sunshine? Complete waste of clear skies. Anyway. So I was up a few months ago, to talk about the Explore the Universe and the Explore the Moon certificates. I know everybody's now done all the observations, filled out the paperwork, and submitted, and Oscar's going to have an absolute flurry of certificates to award in a few months. Next up, we're going to do the Messier list. To me, that's sort of the next level. This is when you start really becoming an amateur astronomer. It requires more skill. The objects are harder to find, things like that. So once you've completed the Messier certificate, I sort of like to say that you're now really an amateur astronomer. Nobody can question your abilities. So there they all are, 110 of them. This is a collection of photographs by Mike Phillips. who did it just as an intriguing project, and I must say that would be an intriguing project. So what is the Messier list? Well, of course, it was a bunch of things cataloged by Charles Messier. You can see him here wearing his Légion d'honneur that he received from Bonaparte. The latter parts of his career was through the revolution in France and the terror and everything. So, some exciting time to do astronomy. So he was born in the early 1700s, and about 1751 he went to work for the astronomer of the Navy. About 17, I mean, he had a bunch of other duties, but one of the little tasks he took on about 1757 was to start hunting the first predicted return of Comet Halley. I mean, think of that. This is the first time, somebody 86 years ago has predicted that Comet Halley is going to come back. Is it really going to happen? So there were a lot of people looking for it. And while he was hunting, and incidentally, the astronomer for the Navy, his boss, had his calculations wrong, so Messier was always looking in the wrong part of the sky for it. However, he did manage to make an independent discovery of Comet de Lennox, and also stumbled across this little fuzzy cloud near one of the horns of Taurus the Bull, which he then had to go back and check every few days to see if it had moved, because of course if it's a comet, it will move. And this didn't move, so he knew it wasn't a comet. But all this activity got him the idea that maybe it would be worth actually searching for comets. Nobody had ever done that before as a real dedicated activity. And over his career, the following, maybe 40 years or so, he actually discovered 13 comets. In the latter half of his career, he did pick up Pierre Méchain as a friend and a colleague, who also helped him with observing and finding some of his objects. So while he was hunting for comets, he also ran across these two little nebulous stars, which turned out to be the globular clusters M2 and M3. They would become the second and third items in his catalog. So having found those two, and again, he's got to go back and keep checking them to see if they're moving. So this is very inconvenient. So he thought what would be useful is to have a catalog of all these little fuzzy objects. So every time you stumble across one, you can say, nope, it's already listed. I know it's not a comet. And the added benefit, of course, of generating a list like this is that it might get you elected to the Royal Academy of Sciences. As it turns out, in 1770, he was elected to the Royal Academy of Sciences, and so by the time he got his catalog done in 1771, 45 objects, he was able to publish it through the Academy. Now, because he was developing a tool for comet hunters, he also went through all the other astronomers' lists that he knew of and collected all their objects and included them in his catalog. So this would be a useful tool for comet hunters. 9 years later, he added another 23 objects. This is when he started observing with Pierre Méchain. So he added another 23 objects, and then a year after that, he bumped the catalog up to the full 103. Now, interestingly, William Herschel got a copy of Messier's list, and it inspired him to start looking for nebulous objects, and only 4 or 5 years later came out with a list of 1,000, which you might think sort of puts Messier to shame, but again, Messier was looking for a tool for comet hunters to find, to be able to identify a non-comet in the sky. So, whereas Herschel had bigger telescopes, he was just looking for everything he could find. And so, of course, the comet hunters were all looking with small telescopes, 3-4 inch kind of telescopes. And what's really interesting is they would continue to do this for 200 years using small telescopes to hunt for comets until Rolf Meyer from Ottawa came up with the idea, what if you used a large wide field telescope like the 16-inch out at the observatory? And everybody says, no, you're a fool. So he sat down and discovered 5 comets, and they said, well, okay, maybe you're right. So it took Rolf Meyer and 200 years to correct this idea of little telescopes. So why do we have 110 objects in the list? Well, there was another 7 objects that had already been discovered by Charles and Pierre. I'm on first name basis with them. That they didn't include in their catalog for various reasons. Maybe the position wasn't quite good enough, or they didn't feel it was worth including, or whatever. But anyway, so subsequent historians and astronomers have added the extra 7. So we have a total of 110. So if we're going to go out and look for these things, it would be nice to know, what was Messier using? Well, in those days, you generally quoted your telescope by how long it was. So he started off with non-achromatic refractors, so it's a single piece of glass. So he had a 30-foot, a 25-foot, and a 19-foot telescopes. They were all sort of 3-inch telescopes, though. He did have 3 reflectors that he used on occasion, 6 and 8-inch. But remember, these are speculum mirrors. They have very low reflectivity compared to a modern aluminum mirror. So they're operating about the same as a 3-inch, maybe even a 2.5-inch telescope. So small equipment. The best ones he ever got to use were a pair of 3.5-inch, well, what he would have called 35-inch or 40-inch refractors, 3.5-inch diameter f12, achromatic. Notice also that every single one of them has a magnification listed. They didn't have interchangeable eyepieces in those days. The telescope came with an eyepiece. So where was he observing from? Well, central Paris at the Hotel de Cluny, 48 degrees north, even a little further north than Ottawa. Pre-electricity and everything, right? So no light pollution. But I suspect the place, Paris, was probably a pretty horrid place back in those days. I suspect most of the heating was by wood or dung, or whatever you could find to burn. So the place probably stank and full of smoke. And of course, he's got these not very hot telescopes. And as an example, his observations of M31, he described as being 2/3 of a degree long. Easily nowadays, you can see 2 to 3 degrees. And if you're really good and under excellent conditions, you can see almost up to 5 degrees. So we shouldn't feel too challenged by what he's been doing. So, what are we going to use? Well, you could actually do it all with binoculars, but a lot of the objects are going to be very small, hardly distinguishable from a star. So if you're, particularly if you're a beginner, you're going to have a hard time seeing a lot of these things. And it's a lot nicer to see some detail in them, not just detect the fact that they exist. So I recommend a minimum 10 to 15 centimeter telescope. Observer's Handbook, it has the list. It has the list sorted by number, by season, by right ascension and everything. So you'll know where to look, what sections of the list to look as you go along. You'll want a star atlas. I like the Pocket Sky Atlas from Sky and Telescope. The Bright Star Atlas, I've donated one down there, so some lucky person gets to go home with my Bright Star Atlas. Or there's the Cambridge Star Atlas. And then in addition, on the RASC website, they actually have Terry Adrian's chart/log system. And it's actually about a 115-page document that actually has charts and pages of like that you can log your observations on and so forth. So it's something that you can print out and take with you to the telescope. And another thing that's nice to have is a guidebook. Tell you what you're looking at. The more you learn about what you're looking at, the better off you are. This was my favorite. This is what I used sort of 40 years ago when I was doing the Messier list. Kenneth Glyn Jones, it's actually just been republished, I think about 2008. Has a really nice route that you can follow through the Coma Virgo group of clusters. Malice and Krymer did the Messier album somewhat later. This is a more recent one, Stephen James O'Meara, the Messier objects. The one thing I've read the book, I don't really remember much about it, but one thing I'm always leery about with Stephen James O'Meara, the guy has the eyes of an owl. So he's going to see things that you probably couldn't see with binoculars. And this is one that Chris recommended as his favorite, the year-round Messier Marathon Field Guide. Now you notice it's year-round. We'll get into the Messier Marathon thing later. So it's also a list of all the objects. So here you can see how the list breaks down, sort of 30-30 open clusters, globular clusters, 40 galaxies. That's about the least number of galaxies you're going to get in most of these deep sky lists, because there's an awful lot of galaxies out there. And then a few bright nebulae, planetary nebulae, and a double star. And I don't know, there's another one that's only got 4 stars in it, and I guess they must have lumped it in with the open clusters. So here's a map of the whole sky. This here is the plane of the Milky Way. So you can see from Cepheus, Cygnus, Sagittarius, and then back up through Monoceros, Auriga, and Cassiopeia. The yellow dots are the open clusters, and you can see they all fall pretty much along the plane of the Milky Way, where we'd expect the most stars. Globular clusters are these ones with the cross in. You can see they're mostly huddled around the center of the galaxy, and it's quite interesting that back about 100 years ago, Harlow Shapley looked at that and said, those things are probably all orbiting around the center of our galaxy. So if you estimate the distance to them all, figure out their 3-dimensional position in space, you get the first realization that the sun is tens of thousands of light years away from the center of our galaxy. A few planetary nebulae, bright nebulae, they also tend to concentrate along the stars. Then, of course, if you want to see galaxies, you want to look up or down from the plane of the galaxy, because there's much less dust. So that's where we find the Coma Virgo group, all the galaxies in Ursa Major. And then there are a few down south of the galactic plane as well. So let's see. You can see that there are some down here that are going to get fairly far south. So this is the objects. You can see, I mean, these are photographs, so they aren't necessarily a good guideline to the actual brightnesses of the objects. But in general, the first half of the list or so is somewhat easier than the last half of the list, just because of the fact that, you know, it's easier to find the brighter ones. And of course, his skills, as ours do, were improving over the years. So you probably want to start with the early numbers somewhat. Although, you know, the seasonal thing, of course, is big. There's a few challenge objects. M40 is a double star, so which double star? I don't, you know, how do you identify exactly which one? And you're sure that you got the right one. M73 is a little thing of 4 stars, but at least the pattern is somewhat distinctive. To look at this photograph, you wouldn't think so. M33 and M77 are also, I think a lot of people find to be challenge objects, because these have a very bright, small core surrounded by a large, faint disk. The faint disk, under any sort of light pollution, tends to be invisible. And so what happens is you're essentially looking for a little fuzzy star when you're expecting the disk of a galaxy. So I mentioned before, there are a bunch of objects down in southern Sagittarius. You can see this is minus 30 degrees south declination. So these objects never even get 15 degrees above the southern horizon. So you're going to want to find a fairly good site, and preferably with no light pollution to the south. And then, of course, there's the Coma Virgo group of galaxies. And up there, yeah, they're kind of faint and they're fairly small. But the main problem can be figuring out which one you're looking at, because there's an awful lot. I mean, there's an awful lot in there that aren't shown on this chart. And so that's why I like Kenneth Glyn Jones's book. He starts from Rho Virgini and goes off. He describes the little triangles and so forth and so on. And you actually end up doing a galaxy hop through that area. So the other option, if you're cocky, around about mid-March, the end of March, as the sun's going down, the eastern horizon lies about here. And so in a twilight sky, you can pick off M77, M76. These guys aren't too bad because they're further north. but you're trying to pick off these two galaxies, maybe this globular cluster, sort of in the twilight as the sun's going down. And then through the night, you know, the sky sweeps by, and all these things, yeah, there's a lot of them, you got a lot of observing to do, but it comes in spurts and stuff. And then by dawn, the sunrise horizon is about here. So again, you've got some, you know, globular clusters. M30 is the big one. You know, you catch everything all night long and you miss one, you've blown your chance to see the whole Messier list in one night. So ideally, you should be a little further south. Ideally, this should be a new moon sort of about the 20th of March. You're actually getting that specific. A week earlier, a week later, it becomes a lot more difficult because, of course, the horizon is shifting to the left as time goes by. So I did one all-night observing session in March, back when I was in university, with the 10-inch on the roof of the physics building at Carleton, and got 95 Messier objects and another 45 NGC objects for a total of 150 for the night, and it just about killed me. So the process, well, you observe all the targets. You remember the earlier lists, you didn't have to observe all of them. You could pick a selection. Here you have to observe all 110. You should log and document your observations, either describe them well or draw a sketch, enough that somebody can be confident you were looking at the correct objects. What I recommend is using a separate log, because you're going to have to show this to somebody. And, you know, do you want to ship off your whole logbook? And also, if you're doing a separate log for this, then you can include all the information that's required. It can be all in one place. It's easy for somebody else to sort through it. Download the application form from the national website, and you can submit it to the observing committee. Either send them your log, or you can come here and get 2 experienced observers to review your log, and they will certify that they believe you've seen everything. And one of the nice log systems, if you want to go this way, this you can actually download from the RASC website. A page for every object, a place to sketch, some description about the object. It includes a lot of the information that you should be including. How good was the seeing, the transparency, what time, the observing location that you were looking from, the telescope, and so forth. And you can either put a description in here or a sketch up here. And there's quite a few of us in the group here, more than happy to review your logs. That's something that comes with experience. Essentially, it's just, you know, 5 is the best. If you go online or you look at some of the observing handbooks, there are ratings, like especially for seeing, that you know, you can judge by. For instance, look with your telescope at fairly high magnification so you can see the airy disk. How much time can you see the airy disk? If you can see it at all, we'll give you guidelines as to seeing and so forth. And as I say, as you get more experienced, you know, once you've got a few hundred nights observing, you'll know, you know, oh, that night that I thought was really good was actually pretty mediocre. This is really good, you know. So, yeah. Sure. Yeah, in fact, that's what I like to do that, because then I tend to talk a lot more, which means I do a much more complete observation than if I was trying to scribble it down on a piece of paper. And I think that's all. So, any other questions? John? Pardon? Basically, that's just how clear the sky is. You know, how easily you can see faint objects and stuff. If there's, you know, if there's haze or not. Even like in the summer, you know, the moisture in the air. Sometimes there can be air glow that can be a problem. So, John.
Is there any good reason why SK managed to miss the double thunder?
I don't know. It's interesting because, you know, I mean, he did include two objects that he clearly knew were not nebulous or anything. The only thing I can think of is that he looked at them and decided that even in his scopes, they were clearly non-cometary, and so he didn't feel it was, you know, yeah, I mean, there's a number of objects like that. You just think, like, how could he miss them?
All right.
So, all right.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks.
And if anyone has any questions, hopefully Rick can field a couple afterwards. All right, so we're going to do observation reports next. So if you're on the list, please get ready to come up.
Thank you.
Jim, you're up first.
Okay,
You can advance the slide with the right button there.
and the laser
This
is
is the green one right
the green one. Very good, very good. Okay. All right. So, whoops. It's my portable light here. So using the Malincam exterminator, this is an 18-second stacked exposure, excuse me, of a section of NGC 6960, which is the Witch's Broom, which is part of the Veil Nebula. And the part that of the Witch's Broom, whoop, I'm not sure if this, maybe going, maybe I'm holding it backwards. Oh, that's the part we're looking at here, the Witch's Broom. And this is actually a supernova remnant, and part of the supernova remnant that we're looking at, I just pointed out to you, and it's expanding alongside a prominent star called 52 Cygni in the constellation Cygnus. Reportedly, the star that went supernova exploded 8,000 years ago and was 20 times the mass of our sun. The total remnants of the Veil Nebula, and you're just seeing a very small part of it at the bottom of the photo there, has expanded to cover an area of the sky roughly 3 degrees in diameter, which is equivalent to approximately 6 times the diameter or 36 times the area of the full moon. So there are several NGC designations for part of the veil. Okay, and on to the next one. I think I'm doing this right. You may remember this image that I showed you a couple of months ago, M20, one of Messier's objects. It's a close-up of M20, the Trifid Nebula. This next image that I'm going to show you is what I would call a focal reduction gone wild. This is a 15-second stacked exposure of M20, but in an attempt to get a much wider field of view, given the equipment that I had. I used a 6.3 focal reducer on a 6 versus an 8-inch optical tube. And I also used a focal reducer on the Malincam exterminator, which lowered the focal ratio to 3.2. So that is the Trifid. And the next two images are taken from dark sites, and they are of another Messier object, M27, the Dumbbell Nebula, in the constellation Vulpecula. And this is a 12-second stacked exposure, but it doesn't show the extended nebulosity that you often see in other images of M27. The bluish-green nebulosity here and there. So on a subsequent night, I decided to look at M27 again, and I increased the exposure from 12 seconds to 20 seconds, and I also adjusted the white balance on the camera, which allowed me to get a bit more detail in the greenish-blue spectrum. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. All right. Who do we have up next? Bob, you're up next. Advance the slide. That one.
Okay. This is a picture of the NGC 51 group. If you replace hours with seconds, that's the difference between Jim's and mine's images. This is really long image. These things here are about 600, let me just double check here, no, 250 million light years away. This is a small part of my frame. I cropped it like crazy, and there's a bunch of galaxies in the middle here, but just the labels are the ones that we were supposed to look at. This is one of the challenge objects, these ones here, and there's all kinds of others. When I look at it on my computer screen, I see a ton of other ones. This is a small image, a long ways away. These things are really faint. They're around 13 magnitude. I have trouble seeing 13 magnitude star images in an 8-inch telescope, although I'm sure you really can. All right, now, next one. This is the opposite. This is really monstrous. It filled most of the frame of my picture. It's about a quarter the size of the full moon, and this is the helix. It's 650 light years away. It's 400,000 times closer than the last image. And one of the things about this is the inner and outer rings that you see there. The inner ring is exploded 12,000 years ago, and the outer ring exploded 6,500 years ago, which makes no sense at all. Why would the inner one be, why would the inner one be older than the outer one? It just turns out that the explosions must have been more violent. The outer ring is moving away at 40 kilometers per second, and the outer one is 32 kilometers per second. Anyway, again, I guess the blue is ionized oxygen, the red is ionized hydrogen. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. It's nice to see someone taking on the challenges. That's awesome. All right. Up next, we've got Rick Wagner.
So to start, I did actually get out and try the challenge object with my 12.5-inch Dob. And NGC 51, there's a couple of galaxies in the field that you can see, but they're very difficult. And they aren't the ones that I think you're supposed to be able to see, judging from my, my star atlas. So I'm going to have to download a chart or an image like Bob's, figure out where they actually are. When you look at uranometria, they're all kind of jammed into a little knot. It's hard to tell which is which. But what I'm up here to actually talk about is ASAS J192916 plus 4637.3, mellifluously named. So this is a variable star that I started observing about a year ago. You can see it's marked. And basically this is a pair of stars that are orbiting each other very closely. And their period has been decreasing rapidly. And so these are the observations I had done up until August. So you can see it's what's called an eclipsing binary. As they orbit, one star goes in front of the other, makes it get fainter and brighter. So it goes up and down. So this would be the primary eclipse, and this is when the heavier star is in front, and this would be when the lighter star is in front, except that the two stars are almost identical now, so it doesn't make much difference. But the period has been decreasing exponentially, they say, and they were predicting that these two stars were actually going to go through a Darwin instability, which if anybody needs to know, I will answer after the meeting, and coalesce and generate a red nova, a luminous red nova, suddenly brightened by 10 magnitudes. It was going to be stunning, and we knew when it was going to happen. So I'm working and trying to figure out, help with the predictions as to when this is going to happen. So I take a bunch of data of nice minima that I've caught, and I overlay them all with approximately the correct period. and then I fit, a, come on, back, there we go. I fit a polynomial to them. So now I have a sort of an average curve that I can fit to my data. So later on, I collect another minimum, and I can actually take that little curve, and mathematically I can slide it back and forth until I get the best fit. And now I know exactly what time, well, within a minute or so, what time it reached minimum. And the nice thing is that even if I don't catch the whole minimum, you can see cloud or something, I can't remember exactly what, my photometry went all the heck, but I still managed to catch enough that I got a good time of minimum. So now using that, I can calculate its period as I measure different minima along. And what we find is this was the prediction. Here's this exponential decrease. This is, I think, Kepler and WASP and the Northern Sky Variability Survey data points, and that's mine. Not where it should be. And I'm wondering, like, what's going on? Fortunately, along comes Quentin Sokia, and they published a paper. They looked back in history and discovered that the original authors had misinterpreted some of the earlier data, and it doesn't look like the star is doing what it's supposed to be. So you can see here, this is the data that the original paper used, and this data point from the Northern Sky Variability Survey, but it turns out there's actually a confusion in the conversion from Julian date to modified Julian date and silliness. Somebody got something wrong, and so this is the actual data point that the original authors should have got. So now you can see this doesn't look anything like an exponential decrease, and you can see that they're also showing that the star is not going where it's supposed to go. So I'm afraid that it's not going to happen. So you can all we'll just have a beer, and that's all.
Thanks, Rick. All right, up next is Paul.
Thank you, Oscar. Make sure I've got this right. There we go. All right. We have a visitor in our neck of the solar system. Comet Virtanen is now a naked eye object. I got lucky 2 nights ago. Let me rephrase that. I had good skies 2 nights ago for 45 minutes, and that's the first kind of clear sky I've had out in my neck of the woods for weeks. Anyway, I took advantage of it. I was fortunate enough to see it. I was watching the satellite loops, and I saw, okay, I've got this window of opportunity. So I've been wanting to bag this comet for a while, even just to have a look at it. But yeah, even in the last month, it's just been a no-show. So 2 nights ago, I hauled out my binoculars, and lo and behold, I could see it. Took away the binoculars, I could still see it. It's definitely there. Now, admittedly, I'm under dark sky. I'm about 20 kilometers west of Almont. Pretty dark sky out there, and it was obvious there. But even from within this, within, I wouldn't say downtown Ottawa, but certainly within an urban environment, I'll bet you can see it with binoculars. And you should try it if you're at all interested in seeing this thing. The forecast for the next almost a week is that we're going to have a spate of clear skies, and the moon's out of the picture. So this thing is big. In fact, I'll advance the slide here. That's the scale of this thing right now, and it's still 9 days away. 9 days away from its closest approach to Earth. When I shot this 2 nights ago, it was still about 15 million kilometers away. On the night of November the 16th, when it makes its closest approach to Earth, it'll be about 11.5 million kilometers away, so about a third again as closest. And interestingly, it'll become one of the 10th closest comets to pass by the Earth within the space age. So definitely worth seeing, and with binoculars, it was very easy to spot, very, very easy to spot. So if you're out checking it out, and I would recommend definitely in this coming week with the clear sky prediction we have, pretty easy to find. It's going to be, it transits around 10 o'clock in the evening, so you don't have to stay up all night to see this. 10 o'clock in the evening, face due south and about 40 degrees elevation. And if you've got binos at all, easy peasy, okay? And if you're certainly if you're in a darker sky, you'll get a greater appreciation for what you're seeing. And if you're in a really dark sky, you'll definitely see naked eye. So yeah, about the size of the full moon. Obviously not nearly as bright as the full moon, but just to give you an idea, this thing is big. I shot this with just a 200 millimeter telephoto lens, so it's quite easy to bag. Definitely check it out. So just to give you an idea, this is my observing conditions were kind of mediocre, and there was about 45 minutes where I had clear sky there, and of that, about 15 minutes where it was half decent. So I took about 60 or 70 shots, just stitched them together, and just to give you an idea of, you can see the trees approaching, but you can see just before it hits the trees. And then you can see the clouds move in. But just before it hits the trees, that's when it becomes clear. So the haze around the star above it removes, and the comet itself pops out more. And then where it was set up, the tracking drove it into the trees. But a few minutes after that, it was gone. That was the sky for the rest of the night. So I took the best 10 shots right here before the trees started interfering, and I stacked them together to give us a closer view. See if I can get that. So that's what you're looking at. There's no pronounced tail to this thing, and it's not expected to generate much of a tail just based on estimates of its composition. But it does have a very spherical coma, very ball-like, and as I say, with it being about the size of the full moon now, and I've read some other reports actually pegging it even larger, it should be pretty easy to find. When you set your binoculars up and have a look there, you'll know it when you see it, because it's just a round, big fuzz in the sky. So check it out definitely. This coming week, your best opportunity for it. The only other object that I've shot over the last almost a month, because the skies have been dismal, is the moon. Happened to be, of course, that was the nice clear night, the night of the full moon. So I thought, well, why waste it, right? In fact, this is I do, most astronomers curse the moon because they wipe out our seeing and that, but there's no other object in the sky that you'll see as much detail as the moon. I mean, it's just a very rewarding object to look with almost any size telescope. This image I stitched together using my big scope, so it's actually a mosaic of 6 different images so I could get the detail. But the thing I loved about this, and I only shot this a few hours before the full moon. You can see it's almost entirely free of shadows. There's just a few shadowy details up on the northern limb there. But this is a time where you can really see, Brian was mentioning this, a lot of the intricate structures that you can't see or are difficult to see at other times because of just because of the way the moon is illuminated. But when it's face on like that, you can see a lot of really, really delicate stuff here, like the ejecta blankets from Copernicus and Kepler and Tycho. I mean, this is just magnificent stuff. For those of you that are new to observing the moon and stuff like that, what you want to do definitely is get yourself a neutral density filter for your eyepieces, because the moon is really bright. And if you, even with a small telescope, if you spend a lot of time examining it, it'll probably give you a headache. I know it does me if I use it unfiltered, because it's almost at that threshold where it's bright enough to become uncomfortable. But a neutral density filter, and they're okay to screw into the bottom of your eyepiece, that will improve your view tremendously. It'll also bring out a lot of this, because right now, when you're looking at the full moon like this, unlike the other phases of the moon when you're observing it, there's virtually no shadow detail. This is all just tonal variation based on the different materials and the surface topography of the lunar surface. So when you can dial down that brightness, you can see a lot of cool stuff that at other times is not so easy to observe. So just a little bit of a close-up here. As I say, this was only a few hours from the moon being full, but you can see a lot of really cool detail that can easily get washed out when the moon is in a different phase there. But yeah, a lot of the deep craters up in the northern lunar region and elsewhere. But just check out the splashes. Whoops, what did I do there? Here, I'll have to advance that a little bit. Sorry about that. Yeah. So as you can see, the tonal variations are really cool. The shadows, when you've got like a quarter of a moon or anything less than a full moon, they can be rather distracting because they're so contrasted, they're so prominent, your eye is kind of drawn to them. But when you see the moon fully illuminated like this, you get a chance to observe things or look at things that you haven't seen at other points in time. Things like, you can see the mountain chains of the Apennines up here and the dark floors of some of these craters. You can see details there, the mare floors of, around the more popular mare like Chrysium. So don't curse the full moon. When you get a chance, check it out. And you might be surprised at what you see that you may not have seen before. I've been looking at the moon for a long time. And so Brian, this one's for you. I was thinking of you when I saw this because I was shooting this one night and I thought, my God, like how have I never noticed this before? You've probably all heard of the lunar X, right? Something to look at. Brian had the lunar face. I mean, we've seen the man on the moon and the rabbit on the moon with the mares and that. But I looked at this and I thought, oh my God, there is something here that is so obvious. How could I have missed it for all these years? I think it discovered a new one of these, these averted imagination features, but I call it the lunar deer. Can anybody see it? The lunar deer? Okay, I'm gonna overlay slightly an image of a deer, and I'll let your imagination go with it. You see the deer? Okay, now I'll take the deer away. You see the face and the body? It's there, man, the lunar deer. So check it out. Next time there's a full moon, throw a filter on your eyepiece there and see if, sure. No deer? With deer. No deer? Oh dear. I'm just stuck for a name. I need a name. But then it occurred to me, it's almost Christmas, so what do you think? What do you think? Lunar Rudolph. I claim it as my own. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thanks, Paul. I don't think I'm going to be able to stop seeing that deer.
Yeah, we
But
were commenting on that while Brian was showing his slides. Oscar said to me,
But I wonder.
I saw your damn deer and now I can't not see it.
I wonder if it had anything to do with your vehicular encounter with a deer recently. That you're seeing deer everywhere now.
There
But
was that too.
you had me looking at that thing, and I think I noticed something else there. Let's see if I can. Hold on. No. He showed that. Hold on. There's something else. Can I do this? So you see the deer, but what I'm seeing here is I'm kind of seeing a little wolf or something there who's about to eat the deer.
Nicely played.
Anyway, thank you for that, Paul.
You're welcome.
So we're going to forego the observing challenge this month just because of timing reasons. So we're going to go through our usual stack here. FLO Star Party. So we do have a members-only Star Party coming up on December 8th. That's tomorrow, weather permitting. I'm not sure what the forecast looks like for tomorrow, but if the weather is good, it will be there at FLO. Estelle's pick of the month is a journey through the universe. So be sure to see her at the library there. Here are some of the folks that help run the club. The recordings of our meetings are always available on our website, so be sure to check them out, and thank you to Michelle for recording them. Our audience tonight was 93, so thank you for coming out. And just as we head into the holidays, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and safe holiday. It's a time for celebration and for spending with family, so be sure you do lots of that. Please don't drink and drive. Make sure you always have a DD. Our post-meeting meeting will be at Grace O'Malley, so you're welcome to join for chit-chat and to wet the whistle there. Our next meeting is coming up on January 4th, same bat time, same bat channel. Membership benefits, you get access to our Ted Bean Loan Library for our telescopes, the Stan Mott Library for books, the Fred Lossing Observatory for access to our telescopes there, and soon to be our second telescope there. You also get these wonderful publications, and it's everyone's favorite time now, door prizes. See you next month.